Thanks, Steve, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. I don't know how many people we have participating today, but I appreciate everybody taking time out of their afternoon. A couple things about AccuSteel that you may not know. One thing that's been highlighted here in the slides, or the four things, is that all of our buildings are engineered. So that happens about 3 different times through our process. So we work with a design engineer when we want to design a new product, and they help us get the designs put together for airflow, for the type of materials. And then we have another engineering firm that certifies those designs before we start to manufacture it. And then the third process we run into is if a customer needs a engineering stamp for equip or for a building permit, we go to an outside engineering firm that can pull that together. So there's really real transparency in our design and our engineering. Everything we do is we meet to the IBC 2015 code, which will be being updated here shortly. Versatility and flexibility. You know, one thing that we do not build is we do not build a kit. We're never trying to come in from a manufacturer standpoint and say, we know exactly what this customer needs, just listen to us and we'll sell you a kit. What we want to work with the customers on is providing a building solution that meets their system's needs. Everyone has a little bit different needs in their company, in their what they're doing and what part of the cattle system that they're participating in, from cow calf, backgrounding, finishing, or the main 3. But we can really get a design that meets their needs. Turn around on the efficiency and the comfort. You know, we currently not only manufacture the buildings where I live, but we also are raise cattle. We finish cattle in an 800 head demonstration barn right outside my house. So not only are we involved with the design of the buildings, we are also participating in this industry, an industry I'm quite honestly very passionate about. We're trying to add efficiency. You know, there's a couple different ways to make money, but efficiency is a very, very important factor. So we want to build buildings that are very efficient for our operators. Service, we sell our buildings through a dealer network. And our dealer network handles, as what you'll see here today with CCS, is a general contractor that can handle from just supplying a building installed all the way to putting the last latch on the gate and putting the doorknob on the office door, as much or as little as you want them to do. From our standpoint, from AccuSteel standpoint, we still maintain a service crew. If we have any needs out in the field that we have to address, we can get those addressed. And we also maintain a 20-year warranty on our fabrics and on our steel. So all of our steel is hot dip galvanized at West Point, Nebraska, predominantly. Valley Industries, the same irrigation company. And so that steel is designed to be in a manure environment. It's not a product. A lot of people say, well, I've got a 50-year warranty on my sheet steel. Well, that's fine. But when you get down in the details, you'll find out that it's not designed for livestock application. Our fabrics are polyethylene. They won't rot. They won't mildew. It's very similar to what you may find in a dump truck liner. So they're a high density polyethylene. Acids won't hurt them. Eventually they do wear out in the sun, but we stand behind that product for 20 years. There should be no defects in that material. It shouldn't rip or tear or crack. So we've been in business since 2001. We stand behind our products. And I would make a strong case in a lot of ways, the way we design our buildings with the hot dip galvanized frames and the fabric roofs, they should really outlast any other type of building material that's being used for cattle buildings today.
All right, great. Thanks, Jason. Why don't we touch on Keator system.
The Keator track system is something that we came up with about, oh golly, it's been over 15 years ago now. And really what it is, what this picture is trying to show there is, and it's really a hard concept for people it's a hard one to show, and it's a hard one for people to understand. But in that building that Steve has there in the slide, there's a green strip of material one bay back from the end wall. If you could highlight that, Steve, with your pointer. That is an individual panel of green material. That is not welded into the other white material. So that is a standalone piece of fabric. The picture that you're seeing of the install crew, that is an individual fabric section that goes into each building bay. And why that's important to us is that most of our competition, or all of our competition, utilizes ratchets and straps to hold their covers on. And what we have chose to do is take a very high-end technology in the fabric building industry and apply it to agricultural buildings. A lot of people say, well, it makes them too expensive. Well, the volume that we've created and the demand, we are the same price or actually sometimes lower than what our competition does with pipe and ratchet. This system attaches the cover to each individual rafter. So the tensioning that is provided in the cover is all done through threaded rods on the end of the eaves. The threaded rods help keep the wrinkles out of the cover, but it's not what holds the cover on. If you loosen your tensioners on an AccuSteel cattle building, there may be a wrinkle in the cover, but the cover will not come off the building because it's attached to each rafter with an aluminum track system. So it's a very industrial type way to do these buildings. It allows us to get some taller buildings. It allows us to get some different shapes on our eaves. It allows us to get more airflow through the buildings, quite honestly, because we don't have the problem with the covers lifting off the rafters. It's very, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's really the only system on these type of buildings to put a cover on a roof. Now, if you're looking for a hay shed or you're looking for a real low hazard type building, we still offer the pipe and ratchet systems. But anything that we do on commercial buildings, anything we do on cattle buildings, are a Keator track system. So we really believe in it. It's been really haven't changed. You know, that's one thing my company has really hung its hat out on over the years. You know, we've updated some clips, we've updated some little things here and there, but speaking from an engineering standpoint and really speaking from a philosophy standpoint, we've never really had to reinvent our company as it relates to design and to the quality of the products that we want to put into our buildings. So we want to do it right. We want to do it right the first time.
All right, Jason. Yeah, that system's worked out well for a lot of years. One thing I did forget to mention, there's a chat box. So if you think of a question along the line, you do that. If you could put your question in that chat box, we'll pick up on those at the end of the session and see if we can get them answered. So let's talk a little bit about ventilation, a very important part of taking care of cattle.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Steve. You know, the ventilation side of our buildings is something that we've really spent a lot of time on and a lot of design. We've learned over the years that equal double eaves on the buildings really create an opportunity for airflow in really all load cases. It's important that we have that eave extend over the curtain side of the building. This is a great picture showing how even when a curtain is closed on an AccuSteel building, we still maintain airflow up underneath that eave. Now that is a real critical point. We've had a lot of producers, especially cow-calf producers, and not knowing, you know, who's all on the other end of the video with us today. But an example of how the airflow works is we've had some producers that are in cow-calf country that say, hey, you know, I'm real concerned about getting snow underneath that eave. And really, when your curtain's down, what that eave does is it allows for air to get up above the curtain and provide positive airflow for your building. So if you are in a, let's say, well, the example I'm thinking of from Central South Dakota, where the customers had a real, multi-day blizzard, that airflow staying positive in the building kept the snow from sucking back in and creating a vacuum effect on the building. And yeah, there was a very thin dusting of snow, but considered to the 18 inches that were outside and around the building, the bunks, and Tony, you can correct me, I don't want to get ahead of my skis here, but I don't believe the bunks needed scoop that morning. And the little bit of dusting of snow that was in that building was gone by noon. No cattle were lost in that blizzard, and compared to being outside, the outcome for that particular ranch was 180 degrees of what it could have been with the normal conditions. So having that airflow on that back eave, the other eave is designed, it's a 6-foot eave is standard. We have an option for a premium eave, but having an eave out that's 6 foot out, it really protects the bunk. Our buildings won't wick water back into the bunk. They terminate out on that termination bar that's, like I say, tensioned with a threaded rod. We've got a building that really is designed to work correctly for putting a bunk underneath it and for cattle to protect that bunk. You can still get a feed wagon underneath it. There's a lot of talk that, what kind of barn you build versus, pit or deep pack. The real important part is always have the right amount of ventilation for the cattle, keep the cattle dry, and it's 100 times easier to keep the cattle healthy.
One of the comments I'll make about that, Jason, is the outfit that you're talking about with them 2 really heavy snows that we had late in the fall. He was just pleasantly surprised at how heavy of a snow it was that, like you said, just got a dusting, but was expecting quite a bit more. And I think at the time, one of them buildings was empty, so it really didn't change much difference in how it come in there. So it ventilated real well, and just a light dusting, but something that once the heat of the cattle melted it out, it didn't take long for the good consistent airflow that the buildings provide to dry that out.
Right. We're not trying to eliminate the weather in our buildings. Cattle are an outside animal. The natural light of the buildings that our covers provide, the good airflow that they provide, we're very much we want to take the extremes out of the weather. And we want to do it at a cost-effective price point that makes sense for an operation. We're obviously in really challenging times today. We're on a Zoom meeting that I'd have never guessed we'd have been on, but with the COVID-19 or the virus or whatever you want to call it, it's a lot of different times in agriculture, and that creates a lot of uncertainty, but it also creates opportunity out there. People that are willing to make a move in uncertain times. It might be more risky, but it can also have larger payoffs. We want to build a building that takes those extremes out of that, gives you a predictable environment, a predictable intake, a predictable situation for your livestock to really thrive in.
All right. Thanks, guys. Now let's move into more the application and start out with cow-calf. So I want to reintroduce Tony Romshek, who's been with CCS for quite a number of years and is really our beef specialist. So Tony, why don't you talk a little bit about cow-calf?
Well, I'm going to back up and kind of on what Jason made the comment about the way his philosophy is with the AccuSteel buildings, and that they don't have I call them a cookie cutter kit to fit everyone. The design of the whole complete turnkey facility by using the AccuSteel facility that's the philosophy that CCS has always had. We strive to try and find, different cattlemen got different ways that they want cattle to flow. They got different ways that they want to manage them, different pen sizes, different applications. So we try to spend the time to go ahead and just make it so that it's going to fit your management style. With that, in the cow-calf side of things, cow-calf is typically a bed pack. we usually, we want at least a minimum of 24 inches of bunk. And a lot of the reason most people want that much or more is because typically to save costs and make it cost effective in a confined situation like this with a cow calf, you're going to feed a limit fed diet. So you're going to want plenty of bunk space so that you can use that application properly. And we want to have 100 to 120 square foot per pair. So a lot of times I'll have somebody that'll call up and say, hey, I want to go with a 70 wide, or I want to go with this width. Well, to be cost effective and still get to them parameters, a 50 foot or a 62 foot wide building are going to be the best fit. 50 foot's going to be your most cost effective. As you go to give them 100 square foot, that's going to naturally give them the 2 foot of bunk space that you're looking for. We've got a lot of different equipment options. People like different ways to set the barn up. We have some different barns that work very well. On that picture up to the right-hand side, there's a back alley in there. That back alley serves as, it adds some cost to the building, but it sure makes it for an efficient way and a really good way to have good health and manage cattle as you're calving them. And I'll explain why. That back alley is a lounging area for the calves. You can see the creek gate in that center picture that we make so that the calves can get back there. That back alley can also serve as in a 300 and some foot building for 150 pair, like that picture one on the right. It serves as probably a way to have 8 different pens for you to, as cows are calving, to put them in there and go ahead and let them get acclimated, get to nursing. And so that it works really well for that. And then it allows people, after you get, if you've got 8 or 10 cows that have calved and you put them in there, you can sort them in to a pen of their own so that they stay at the same age, and it just makes an easier way to manage colostrum through the barn. Another couple things that we offer is, if you don't have the back alley, like that lower right picture, we put, I call it a feed apron alley. And that just makes it to where you can close cattle back into the bed pack and move them down through that, or you can come in and easily clean, or guys will even drive their bale processor in and bed the barn from there as well. That system, that picture there kind of shows a lot of what Jason was talking about on the airflow, where you got the 2 eaves off to the side and that ridge vent down the center. And one of the things that we do is we go to using these barns for different applications on finishing cattle. Jason has the barn ridge cut out of there, but if you want to limit that back because you're maybe going up to 100 square foot with a cow calf pair, then there's times that we'll go every other bay and have it open, or even skip 2 bays and have one open. Another thing to make a notice on here, and you can't really see it all that well, is up there along the feed bunk on the left-hand side of that bottom right picture, we've got an adjustable feed rail that allows you to have cow-calf pairs in there, but then you can also, if you're weaning and want to adjust it down to have fresh wean calves in there, it works well for that as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Another comment I'll make too is that on that picture up to the left, we've got some guys that wanted to try a different application of it and try partial confinement with cow calf. And that barn's actually is a brand new facility we've just set up, and it's set up to, and you might point at it, but the big long barn, they're going to feed in there and the cows can feed out either side. And then in the stand up in the front, they'll go ahead, you can go ahead and they can just have partial confinement come out. And then that barn in the right hand side is the little barn, is the one that they have their assistant pen in there, and are all set up with the medical room to be able to assist cows if they need to. And this is the same producer that it's actually on the corner of their feedlot. And if you look up on the top of the picture, there's a 650 head deep pit cattle finisher that we built for them as well. And so it just gives you kind of an idea right there in that picture how versatile we can be with the buildings.
Okay, Tony, here's that other picture we talked about. Are you still there?
Yeah, yes, that gives a lot better idea of what we can do, different design stuff, and it really lets you see that back curtain in the back, and you look up over the top, and that's one of the real important things I've seen in different facilities, especially when you switch to that. When you have that curtain closed, it can get pretty stale in the back of your barn if you don't have the proper amount of inlet to let the air come in. But and then up front, you can see now that adjustable feed rail, that pipe up there on top of the bunk is actually put up out of place, and you can move it down below to adjust it. And all them gates are made with slam latches, so they can slam up there by the I-beam up by the feed bunker, come back to the main feed rail.
A couple things, if I'm still able to.
So we can move on.
Yeah, can you still hear me, Steve?
Yep, you're on.
You know, a couple things to point out from the building standpoint. It's a good picture there of the I-beams. You know, we don't bolt our I-beams onto the concrete and bolt a building to them. We actually have that as an I-beam post that goes down. It has to be covered in at least 4 foot of concrete. So below that post, right above the manure step, there is 4 foot of concrete that's encased in with a plate on the bottom of it. So if that post ever had to come out, you'd have to pull that whole concrete encased post out with that base on it. It's a fully engineered, it's a very economical way to put a foundation up. And it's also hot dip galvanized. So we're not relying on any wood posts. We're not relying on any bolts or wedge anchors trying to go into a concrete slab. It's really the correct way to do a cattle building or really do a foundation on a building. The other thing that you see in there is the depthness of our truss, of the wind braces, the K braces that lock every cover into place. That's really a really good picture of the, you know, I think that really speaks to the quality of the building itself. You can also see that we add additional wind braces to the curtains on the backside. So, you know, there's, I believe this picture has steel sheeted in walls with steel framing. Is that correct, Tony?
Yep.
So
Yes,
that building,
correct.
you know, we can use either wood or steel with steel framing on the ends. So it's a really good picture to point out some of the benefits of the AccuSteel building. And then probably the last benefit, which I think some of the most important for performance of the cattle, is the natural light of the barns. You know, that's one thing that, you know, I probably honestly don't talk about enough because I take it for granted, manufacturing the buildings and just expecting the natural light. But, you know, we try to go out on barn tours. I want to keep myself educated in the industry, and I'll go to a competitive barn and I'll learn something on cattle handling, or there's always little things that we're always improving on. But one thing that I always, you know, walk away from is the natural light of the barns really separates what we're doing. It's just so much more of a natural environment especially for that cow calf, especially for that calf. The natural light is just really hard to beat.
Very good. How about a couple comments on backgrounding, Tony? Tony, are you still there?
Yeah, if you can still hear me, Steve, I mean, I can talk a little bit about backgrounding facilities till Tony gets back.
Go ahead.
You know, Tony really is the one really to be talking
and I don't
about
know
this. But
what we have for the next picture.
there he is, or there he was.
He was.
You know, if we go back to backgrounding facilities, you know, really the goal in the backgrounding facility is coming up with enough bunk space to manage a low cost ration to put on cost effective gain on the cattle. And quite honestly, this is a phase of growing cattle that may be the most profitable in a feed yard operation. You know, from my own personal experience, you know, we really like to buy calves in those 6 weights because we have a barn that really works well for essentially growing cattle and for finishing. And that growing cattle phase is like I say, a lot of times where that profit's made on that group of cattle. So enough bunk space to make sure we can get everyone up to the bunk. We can get cattle growing. I think the other thing that I've learned as I fed cattle is that the buildings are really, really good for identifying sick animals. You know, it takes a little bit of time to be able to get used to that environment, but it's a great environment to go in and see where if you got somebody with its ears down, the cattle's disposition really changes once they've been in the barn for just a little while, and they seem to calm down. They seem to relax. They understand their would be the right word for it. They understand they're in a safe place, and they don't have to be in quite that herd mentality where they've got a 250-foot pen where they can run back and forth, and the sick ones can kind of try to hide to the center and hang back. It's a little bit different environment for identifying health concerns. I'm going to have to lean forward here, not to scare everybody with my getting closer to the camera, but you know, equipment options that Tony had listed on here. Hopefully we can get him back. But, you know, the feed apron scrape alleys, you know, not all of our barns have to have 100% concrete. Our barns can run north or south or east or west. It can be a facility that we can put over existing working facilities or existing bunk space, you know, and then something that a lot of producers, you know, it's a little different with the cow calf because of the density of the building. But manure storage is always an important part of what we design for. You know, in some states we have to have it undercover. Other states we can stockpile outside. But it's a building that you want to be designed around a wheel loader. I didn't really bring that up before, but we don't design around skid loaders. We design around wheel loaders, which are larger, more similar to a tractor size. We want to have the most efficient equipment that we can in the building and make sure it has space to operate in that facility. You know, one thing that CCS has really developed, which I think is extremely smart, is that feed rail. You don't always have to put in feed bunks. This is probably more for a cow calf type facility, but you know, feeding over dairy curb, you got to push the feed up a couple times a day. But the idea of it is it's a great place to let the calves through that walkway. It's maybe back to slide, but see what I'm trying to get at. And I don't know how many people are here joining us today. You know, hopefully we have a really good crowd and a good opportunity to visit, but it's you know, we'll do the question and answer section here in a little bit. So if you got questions, feel free to type them in or write them down on a note and type them in as we get to that section. But I know Jen, you're back at CCS, will be facilitating some of those questions and answers. But CCS provides a lot of innovation.
Am I back on?
You are, Tony.
Yeah, you're on, Tony. By the way,
I didn't want to interrupt Jason.
No, you can interrupt me anytime. This is your slide, so get right after it.
Yeah, by the way, we've got 47 people on.
Oh, excellent. Thanks, everybody, for taking time out.
Yeah. All right.
Oh,
Tony,
good deal. Hey, that's awesome. Well, just to give a little bit of an idea. So just to give a little bit of an idea, Jason was talking about that the buildings can go north and south. And that picture with the two long white yellow striped buildings, that's actually, they are going north and south, where you got the cursors on the north end. And them barns are sitting, I don't remember exactly, we were about 65, 75 foot apart. And they hold, they were 608, 60 by 608, so they hold right at 900 head apiece. So one of the nice things about that is, I know a lot of competitors will tell you that you can't really ever put a building north and south, but them big double eaves that Jason puts on these buildings allow us to get adequate airflow going that direction. And what makes it kind of nice is because you don't need as much separation distance as you maybe do on an east-west layout. It allows you to stack more buildings in if you're limited to the amount of ground that you want to put cattle on. So that's the last comment I got on that, but I wanted to make that comment because that's a pretty important deal, and that allowed this feedlot to be able to put two here, and they could expand with two more to the east pretty easily if they ever needed to.
Yeah, good comment, Tony. Here's a drawing. of a typical facility, right?
Well, and that barn actually, and you don't need to, or you can bounce back to that picture that we were talking about for quite a while. That's actually the north barn at Lakeview. That's the exact layout of what that is. So where it had that, and go back one more. You went forward one, go back one.
Is that what you need?
No, one more. You can just show it quick and then. Can you go back one more, Steve? Right there. So that, now you can go back to the design, but this is, that design that I was showing you there was that exact layout.
Okay.
And that's important. If I interject there, that's important when you're working with anybody that you're going to build a project with, regardless fabric buildings or whatever, is someone who can take this design concept and manage it all the way from the conceptual design, working with the customer, all the way to the completion with the customer. And that's something that we try to work with all our dealers to do, but that's something that CCS really excels at is coming up with. And I was right before Tony got back on, I was going to say, Tony has a great feel for how cattle operate, the natural instincts of cattle, and really does a good job working with producers to set up very efficient barns. So, that's something that you're not only getting a quality project, but you're getting some experts that can come in and really, show you what works, take you to other people's barns, have you call customers, do research, do as much research, go to as many barns, regardless of the type, as you can before you make your decision on which direction you want to go.
Thanks, Jason.
One of the comments I'll make about that design, if you want to go back to that again real quick, Steve.
Okay.
Is that you can kind of see where we had that, I call it the apron alley, just where we can lock the cattle into the bed pack portion of it. And so you see them gates, and you probably can't really tell it by this design here, but like the post of where the on the fence divider at that water tank is actually back. So we got them in an angle. So it still hits a slam latch at that angle, but it makes it so that Jason talked about, not only do we want to have clearance with the wheel loader in there so that you can hit it, but it also, by putting them in there and design it like that at them angles, it just allows us to come clean that barn out or be able to turn into them pins rather easily. So I just wanted to point that out.
Well, good. Okay, how about a little bit on deep pit?
So I've got actually 3 different ways that we've done a deep pit. The picture up on the left is probably the most efficient. A lot of people that come and see that facility really like the efficiency of it. You have to be able to manage a little bit less bunk space. It's 38 foot wide. So when you are given cattle in a deep pit situation, 22 to 25 square foot, you're getting down around that 6.5 to 7 inches of bunk. But if managed properly, it's a very cost-effective way to build a pit barn. We build either 10, 12, or 14 foot deep pits. We're actually got a barn that we're proposing right now. That's an 8 foot deep pit for some heifers that are dairy heifers that would be a little bit smaller weight and not have as much manure. We go the 38 wide is the most efficient, and I can show you some designs here in the next couple slides, but we'll stay here for now. The 67 wide is another one that if you insist on having an inside feed drive or bringing that bunk space up so that they can eat on both sides of the building, 67 foot wide building will allow you about a 15 to 17 foot drive on the other side in a 48 foot wide pit. So you're getting up around that 10, 11 inches of bunk when you're letting them feed on both sides. We've got several options of the different companies out there that offer the slat rubber. I typically introduce the producer to the different companies and let them make that decision on what kind of rubber they actually want to use. And then a lot of the barns will put pump access slats in the back of them so that we'll set the gates up so that it locks the cattle off so you can access the pump out and be able to agitate and pump out of there. And then another thing that I want to point out here too is that we got a barn up there on the right-hand side, if you want to point at that one, Jason. We're sitting on the south end of it, and that's what I call a hybrid barn. The producer in Northwest Iowa by Lamar that wanted to be pretty versatile. He wanted to be able to background lighter calves in there, wanted to be able to calve out his cows in there, and also wanted to be able to finish cattle on slats if he could as well. So the northern part or above that green tank on there is bed pack, and then the back half of the barn down here on the south is a slatted barn. So it's worked really well for him, and it just allows him to be really versatile at different times of the year. So we can move on, Dave, Steve.
All right.
And one comment I'll make too, and we can get to the next part of it. One of the nice things, Jason's really versatile. In that barn, he can, and that's a good picture. Go ahead and stay right there. But we could go ahead if we got a drive alley like we do. This is a barn that is the 67 wide, so there's that 15-foot drive alley, and then the rest of the barn is pit. And what is nice about and versatile about the way it is on the left-hand side where the inside feed drive is, or would typically be the north. You can see there's an I-beam that goes down into the ground because you're out away from the pit. And then Jason can go ahead and make it so that on the back side of it, he's just got to where we take the truss or the leg and mount it right straight down onto the pit wall. This design right here, it's a really cost-effective design for a wider barn with a back drive, because some of the different slat companies we use, we can get a 24-inch lentil or beam that will allow us just one center row of columns down the middle. And so it just makes it for there's less interference when you go to agitate and just less cost when you don't have to put as many columns in. But this barn is really cost effective for the type of building that it is, offering you that extra bunk space. So this is would be the 38-foot wide AccuSteel integrity. It allows where you're just feeding out underneath the one side, and there's another one row of columns down the center, as you can see there. But because you don't have that extra drive under roof, it's just more cost effective where we're not wasting square footage that we're not feeding cattle on. And Jason, if you have any comments on the two different designs.
No, it's just, really, everyone asks us what's our best of the design, and really what fits your operation. We're not here to pick one design over another. It's just really what makes the most amount of sense for the customer. I have a barn that has bunks on both sides of a pen. I honestly think it's harder. I've got another barn that's got bunks on one side. I think it's harder to manage bunks on two sides of a pen, but it gives me the bunk space that I need to really start smaller cattle. So, it just working with a consultant, working with a partner that can understand your operation, understand cattle, and bring together an efficient operation is really what it's the kind of partnership. It's easy to say, sometimes it's hard to do, but do things right. And AccuSteel worked really hard with our suppliers to do things right. It's been volatile times getting in material. We're very fortunate right now at AccuSteel. We've got quite a bit of work lined up because we've got a lot of dealers out there, and we've got people like CCS that are out working with producers that have a long-term goal, a long-term vision to be successful and be in animal agriculture. Obviously, we've got good corn prices for if you're a feedlot, We've got tough corn prices if you're a producer of corn. But long term, I think that we're going to get through this virus, and we're going to, maybe not real fast, but we're going to get our country open back up. And I think there's going to be good demand for our products, and people are going to want to eat, and they're going to want to eat healthy, safe food. And that's what we're going to do here in the Midwest is raise healthy, safe protein. And these buildings are a real big part of that future going forward. I know I'm from Iowa, and I know there is very, very, very few traditional feed yards being built. The future of agriculture is going to be in some kind of a confinement type building system because of the efficiencies that it raises. Now, maybe I used the wrong C word there for some people, but the idea is that we're going to be going forward in some type of a building structure, and we really work hard to build the right kind of building structures for the future of animal agriculture. And then that's something that we're very passionate about. And if you're considering to make that step for the future and get set up in these times, steel is very economical right now. It's a good opportunity. And I think we've shown that by not just our number of work orders that we've got to work through, a number of projects, but also just even having 40 plus people on this call is a testament to the forward lookingness of the American agricultural producer.
Yep.
So I appreciate everybody's time. So.
Yeah, and we agree with you, Jason. We got a few more slides. Like to get through those slides, and then we've got a couple questions that people want answers to. So got a couple quick comments on dairy there, Tony.
Yes, you can be very versatile in what we can do with the dairy, and it can go from heifer development with a barn like we've got the green barn up on the top. I've got a facility right now we're proposing in Minnesota where they're going to have headlocks on each side, and that's going to work really good. I'll show you that. You can get wider with what is the crossover building. I'm in that center picture. That's out in Illinois, isn't it, Jason? That's a facility
North Central, very northern Illinois.
Three or four robots in there, Jason, I think.
It's two robotic milkers.
I don't remember
got the
correctly.
robotic feed pusher. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so this is the design that I was talking about before, and I've even done another design before, but you could set up a robot facility in here really conveniently. You could still have the free stalls, and a guy would set it up on one end, but this is going to be a dairy heifer or a cabin facility that will allow somebody to be able to have headlots on both sides, be able to catch them and do all the processing and stuff that they do in the dairy facilities.
And a good example of what we can do with our design team here on laying out exactly what you need. Here's an example of how our drawings look. You do a very professional job. So here's a couple of examples.
Yeah, and I'll make a comment on that.
Okay, here's a couple of examples of commodity buildings. I think the lower left is actually a grain storage building, but very versatile.
That's correct. That's correct, Steve. We can build. We're not just a cattle. We're not just a livestock or grain. If you live in Nebraska, where CCS is located at, AccuSteel currently has the state contract for the Nebraska Department of Roads. So all the salt storage facilities that you see go up in Nebraska and many of the other surrounding Midwestern states are AccuSteel design sheds. So we've got the engineering, we've got the capabilities. We can really do, if you have a need to put something under roof and do it economically, or do it with lots of height, or for being able to back trucks in, or there's a hang conveyors, put it on precast walls. There's just a lot of versatility that AccuSteel can bring to the table for you.
Good, thanks, Jason. So I know we want to get to some of these questions. My last slide here on CCS is some of the things that we really focus on as a company when we're providing a project. And real quick, just on-time scheduling and some very experienced superintendents focused on quality. We get you weekly progress reports, and I think the thing that we really focus on is your satisfaction as we work our way through that project as more of a partnership when we build for you. So let's get to a couple of questions here. Let's see, Ginger. Okay.
You go all the way up. First one's from Tyler.
Tyler.
And Jason, can I make, or Steve, can I make a quick?
Sure.
I was just going to make a quick comment that one of the things to tell everybody on here that we've built a lot of different facilities in a lot of different areas of the Midwest. And I see Dave Skaggs is on here. We got representatives up in the Dakotas and Minnesota. We built a barn recently in Southwest Minnesota. We've got several in South Dakota. We've got a couple in Kansas, and we're just starting to build one in Missouri. So one of the things that really sets them apart and makes you understand what the facilities are about is to go on a tour. So if you're got some direct interest in possibly doing something like this, get a hold of us and let us take and go show you the facilities so you can see how they look, not just how they look, but visit with the customers and see how it's working and why it's working and what their thoughts on them are. So I just want to make that comment quick, Steve.
No, that's a great point, Tony. We do spend plenty of time visiting sites, and we've got a lot of people happy to show off their facilities. So the first question from Tyler is, in my research on confinement barns, I've learned that orientation is critical for ventilation with a monoslope. Is the orientation the same with this style of building? What orientation should I look at for an AccuSteel building?
You know, that's a question that I can pick up with there, Tyler. The buildings, you know, when we talk
on that, Jason's more than welcome to comment as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear us, Tony, but your Wi-Fi may be a little bit stretched there. But the direction of the buildings is real important. But it also, when you're building an equal balanced building that uses venturi and air balance, basically unequal air balance, you create a high pressure underneath the eave, and you have low pressure to the center of the building, and you're creating that three-way airflow. We can get our buildings to respond really any direction. I would say if we had a preference, we'd probably build the buildings east and west, open to the south, or feeding on the south bunk line. But a larger number of our buildings are built north and south for what Tony said, for the reason of better airflow closer together running north and south, and also because we have customer sites that are already set up for north and south. So it really makes, I don't want to say it makes no difference, but the differences that it makes is really minute in our building design, you know. And you're exactly right. You definitely don't want to build a monoslope building any direction but open to the south. And I'd really challenge the monoslope designs. I'd really challenge them on being able to create good airflow. I think honestly the monoslope designs have narrowed themselves up the last 10 years. But when you start talking about those 100 and 120 foot wide monoslopes, they have a terrible hard time, even though they're so open to the south, to move airflow completely across them. You know, there's just anytime that you're trying to push air that far one direction and have a mono airflow, one-way airflow, it's just really difficult to create that. And when it's difficult to create it is when it's that hot summer day in August or July where there's very little wind and high humidity. that's where the AccuSteel buildings with that center peak height really can get the differential. I don't know if anybody can see me or not. I'm talking with my hands here, but can really get that differential air to come underneath the eaves and then get out that top of the building. And it makes a huge difference for the comfort of the cattle. And then the other thing is, you know, the fabric, there's a few rumors out there, well, the fabric will get hot or it's a greenhouse fabric. Until you've been in a fabric building in the summertime, it is probably the most naturally shaded environment you can get, short of being underneath a mature shade tree. And when I talk about a mature shade tree, I mean that specifically because a mature shade tree will have the leaves near the outside of the canopy, and near the trunk, it'll be pretty much leaf free, and you'll create that same effect that we're trying to get into the buildings, where air will come underneath that canopy and it can go up the center of the tree. So there's the airflow in a properly designed building with 2 sets of eaves and a center ridge vent will really perform really well in some of the toughest environmental conditions. And the toughest condition we have for cattle in the Midwest is heat and humidity. It's not the cold. It's not winter conditions. Winter conditions can be brutal during that blizzard, but really, if you have cattle access to a dry place to lay down, you keep their hide dry, you got access to good water and good feed, cattle can take a tremendous amount of cold. That's not what we're trying to solve the problem. Where we really try to solve the problem with our buildings is when you're trying to wean calves in the heat, you're trying to bring in new calves in the summertime, you're trying to get cattle started. When you do that under roof, your opportunity for success goes up exponentially.
Hey, Jason, got a few more questions for you here. Next one I think is up your alley. Is it possible to build over an existing concrete pad that's mostly level but not perfectly level? And then what are the obstacles to doing that?
Sure. You know, our very first cattle building was built up by West Bend, Iowa, and that's exactly what the producer brought to me. He had an existing concrete feed apron with an existing bunk line, and he wanted to know if we could come up with a way to put a building on that site. And that site was less than level. And that's kind of where we came up with the I-beam, you know, solving problems that the customers have. We do that all the time. That's really how we cut our teeth in this industry, was covering up existing facilities. So if you've got an existing strip of concrete, you know, that becomes the question of saying, well, my concrete runs north and south. We can still add a tremendous amount of value to that space for feeding cattle. We can have a great manure management plan. We can make sure that barn can be scraped. We can design that space so it still works north and south. But yeah, you know, how much can we drop between the I-beams? How much can we drop over a whole site? It really depends on your site. I know I've worked with CCS here recently. We ran across a couple sites that it's probably not practical to put buildings on, but those were sites that maybe lost 20 feet in 300. You know, if you lose 5 or 6 feet in a couple 100 feet of grade, or the grade goes up and back down, we can adjust that. And that's the nice thing about the fabric buildings. If you try to put a roof on that way and let the trusses somewhat follow the grade of the ground, you'd be trimming 10 till you're blue in the face. The fabrics have a layer of flexibility, and that Keator track system. We've been on grades. I think probably the worst grade we had was we did a grain storage facility for the Arcadia Co-op, and I believe in a 400-foot barn, I think they lost about 25 feet. So, you know, we can do a lot of different things with the fabric buildings that would just be really tricky or difficult for traditional construction to do. But the short answer is, you bet we sure can. Let us come out, take a look at it, and we can give you a competitive quote to cover up an existing concrete apron.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
Can I make a quick comment on that? So a comment I want to make too is that with the new integrity truss that Jason has with his buildings, if you've got a concrete pad or apron behind your bunk that's got some good reinforcement, it's pretty easy that we can actually just attach right to the top of that apron and then have I-beams in the back. So it makes it actually pretty easy to retrofit in the end. Oh,
good point, Tony. And thanks Theo, for that question. The next one is, can we make these buildings with openings to a dry lot outside? Tony, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that. And I don't know how easy it is for you to switch back, but I've got several people starting to look into something like that, is feeding right down the center of a building and then just have at least a covered area for cattle to come in and eat. And if that open calving facility was set up just like that. So yes, it is possible.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, James wants to know, in a cow-calf building, is anyone using a grid to better hold down the lime or aggregate below the bed pack?
I'm familiar with what you're talking about. It's like a polymer, maybe looks like a hexadal system that kind of provides a structure for the lime rock. I think the quick answer to that is yes. There are some producers that are using that. It all depends on what cost point you can get that in at. What we have found is it's not all barns need to be designed with 100% of concrete, but if you try to get too fancy with the lime rock going in there, you may end up with close to the cost of concrete anyway. So my thoughts would be is to really just focus in on trying to do it an economical type system. And if you find that isn't working out for the way that you want to manage the barn, you could always come back and put more concrete in later. But yeah, I know some guys that are using it. I think they're getting along with it pretty good. But I just always caution people trying to do too much with that lime rock base. Just be careful what your cost of the concrete alternative is.
Good, thanks. Another question from Tyler. Have you built any barns in Kentucky, and more specifically, an equip project?
I do believe we have some other dealers, and I think even CCS has worked down in that area before. So yes, we have some cattle buildings in there. I could get, if you reach out to us after this, give us a call on our telephone number. I think we can get an address and some locations of actually a couple barns in Kentucky, and we are familiar with the rules through equip in Kentucky, so we can meet all those provisions that your county office may be looking for to do an equip project in Kentucky. So that's definitely doable.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Now here's a real interesting one. What is the effects of earthquakes on deep pit barns?
Well, that's that would actually, quite honestly, we've done some projects in earthquake prone areas. They were not for cattle, but in Southern California. And per the IBC code, there is a factor for earthquakes. Now, our buildings are designed for that. The pit itself, that would have to be designed for earthquakes, but there would be probably a rebar layout. There would be some isolation rock outside the wall. So I think that is definitely, let me put it this way. There's already facilities in California that are in earthquake zones that are set up for dairies with pits and pitted lagoons or concrete enclosures for manure wastewater. So I think that's a problem that has been, can be addressed. I don't know at what cost point today, but I know because I've been in Southern California and I've been up in the Bakersfield area on some projects, and I know we can design the buildings for the earthquakes, but the foundations and the specifically to the pit designs, I believe that is something that can be solved, through math or through engineering.
Yep, that makes sense. I think we'll do one more question and then we'll wrap this up. But question comes from James. How many cow-calf buildings have been built successfully with EQIP or government programs? I'm in Ohio. Anything special that needs to be considered here in Ohio, where we have very wet, humid winters for cow-calf airflow?
Well,
Well,
I'll make a comment.
go ahead, Tony.
I think the only thing that, what for sure we can definitely got the facilities or the barns that you can work with equip on. And as far as the airflow goes in really wet areas, with the way the barns are set up with the big eaves, if we have to, that's your inlet to where you're bringing fresh air in. And from a cow-calf standpoint, if a guy needs to cut more ridge in to speed that air up, it should be very adequate in giving you the amount of air that you need. And one other comment I'll make on Jason's barn, and I don't know if he will totally agree with this, but the integrity style building that we're using now is a little bit taller type of a building, and it seems to really increase the airspeed on them. So I think that's going to allow you to get the ventilation coming through there. Even with the curtain closed, you're going to get fresh air coming in and drying that barn out.
Yeah, I mean, humid environments is all about the airflow, and I think even in a wet, cold, damp environment, I still think keeping the cattle dry. And we've had producers say, well, you cut that ridge vent in, and you're going to let water through that building. If the building's ventilating correctly, there's very little snow, very, very little rain that comes back through that ridge vent. It's not unmeasurable, but it's insignificant to the production of the building or the cattle's dryness or health. I mean, I dryness to me is equal to health. And in a cow-calf facility, giving that calf the best environment it can to get started. One thing we didn't really talk about is much production of under cow-calf, and I'm probably not the right guy to necessarily ask that, but a lot of people that build these buildings for cow-calf production, they'll end up adding a second herd. They may already have a spring herd. They may look at adding a fall herd into that facility. There's definitely a advantageous. I know some guys are looking at maybe calving out 3 crops in a fabric building, or even more with some different management practices. But the idea is it gives you a tool in that toolbox that you don't have to be at the whim of the weather. And, wet environments, regardless of the temperature, are great environments to consider putting cattle under roof. And we're not telling you, I'm not coming to you today from the standpoint we got to put all cattle under roof all the time, or this is the only way to do it. This is a tool in your toolbox. This is something where you can bring pairs in, you can get them mated up, you can get them comfortable with the building, they can calve in them, you can get that calf up and going, and you may have the ability to put that calf back on grass. We want to build a facility that works for your operation. It isn't. There's not a play manual to say here's how you have to run our buildings. What we do like to do is we like to have you talk to other successful customers, and quite honestly, I don't want to get over my skis or promise something that we can't deliver. But I don't know of anybody, and I haven't been able to meet everybody that has my buildings. I get to meet a lot of them, but I haven't met everybody. But I'll tell you, if there's somebody that isn't satisfied with their buildings or how they're operating, I want to hear about it, because I truly do want to try to find you the resources or find you other producers to learn from, to try to get your building to be the most productive it can be. And that is truly something important to me. I know that's important to CCS. And, when you're looking for a partner, when you're looking for a building partner or some style of building to go with, having those extra resources, or having that network of people that you can go to talk to see what's working for them or what's not working for them, sometimes is most important. But the ability to work together to figure out how to make your operation better. I haven't ran into any of our customers that have been, I figured this out and I'm not going to tell anybody. That is something I've never heard, and I truly hope I never do. We seem to have a little bit of a community started of people that want to be successful, want to try new things, and can learn from each other through that experience. So
Well, a comment I'll make on that, Jason, and follow up from what you said about how versatile in a cow-calf situation is. I've got producers, like you said, are running 2 herds. I've got people that are even rotating 3 herds through there. So it allows them to get a lot of production out of them buildings. We have people that are doing nothing but setting up recips and running embryo cows through there. We got people that are bringing pregnant recips in and calving them out, and the barns are definitely working for all of them different aspects. So it's definitely a very versatile facility that can fit a lot of operation.
I don't know if we're about wrapped up, but if this is my chance to say thanks to everybody, I sure appreciate everybody's time today.
Yeah, Jason, thank you. And Tony, thank you. I think we will wrap it up. We might have 1 or 2 lingering questions, but we'll follow up on those with those folks who sent them in. Definitely want to thank everybody for their time and hope this was educational. A couple of ways to get a hold of us here at CCS is, 1, to give us a phone call. That's at the bottom of your screen there. The other is to log on to our website, and if you'll just answer a couple of questions on the contact block there, we'll get back in touch with you and have Tony get with you and discuss those things that are important to you and to your specific application. We'd love to work with you and appreciate your time. I think we'll have another webinar coming up soon, and I think we'll wrap it up. All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thanks,
Yep,
guys.
take care. Have a safe spring.